So it's a side of the conscious mind. Like this is where we have the conscious mind, we have awareness, sensory perception, voluntary order, initiation, communication, memory, storage, understanding. So right now, it's your cerebral cortex that is working, or not. But this is where we get to cool things where you can go to research and use functional magnetic resonance imaging, like these images are showing right here, and then show where is there increased blood flow as we ask you to do different things, right? So we show you an image and we see at the very back, there's where you have more blood flow. We give you a sound or some music and hearing. We ask you to say something, or we ask you to solve a mental problem. We don't just say, okay, think about an orange balloon on a white beach. We say, you know, if a train leaves Chicago at 100 kilometers an hour and needs to go to New York City, which is so far away, how long will it take? There's this thin superficial layer of that gray matter, which we talked about again and again and again. Really, what you need to know is those are cell bodies. The dendrites are kind of the receiving components on your cell body. Glial cells are support cells, and there's blood vessels but no axon. Out of curiosity, side note, anybody see that movie Lucy?
Yeah.
With Scarlett Johansson? Yeah. Total crap. Okay. Oh, we only use 10% of our brains. Yeah, you know what? That's because the other 90% is basically connective tissues and blood vessels and all that. You can't think with a blood vessel. So, cerebral cortex is 40% of the mass of the brain, so we're talking that gray area. And then, again, functional imaging shows that there are associated areas with different functions. There's one of those, I don't know if anybody ever saw it, it's a bit older now, but it's like that older Canadian heritage moment where this woman's having seizures, so they go in, do brain surgery while she's still awake, so it's just local anesthetic, and he's poking different parts of her brain, and whenever she was about to have a seizure, she would smell burnt toast. And so they poke the one area, and she'd, doctor, I smell burnt toast, and then they find the area associated with the seizures. So it's kind of cool that. There are less invasive ways to figure out brain function than actually like taking your top off and poking it with it. I mean, we can put on sensors. I've been involved in studies where you have to put on the sensors. The only bad thing is you either have to shave your head or put it in this goo that'll carry the signal, and that takes like 2 hours to wash it out. Or they can do something like the functional imaging that we saw in the previous picture. There are 3 types of functional areas. So the motor areas are for controlling voluntary movement. So everything that you think about doing, there's those areas. And you can see kind of in this diagram from page 437 where you have the motor areas. Primary motor cortex, premotor cortex, frontal eye field, and Broca's area, which is outlined by the dashes in here, all specifically for motor areas. Sensory areas, you have vision in the back, hearing in the middle, taste, middle, front, and then somatic sensation in the back top. And association areas where you integrate diverse information, right? One of those things where maybe while you're studying a part of anatomy, you listen to the same tune over and over and over again, and then on a test, a question comes up, you think of the tune, and you associate the answer with that tune. Or did anybody ever watch with, what's his name, Cumberbatch and Benedict, Sherlock Holmes? What's his name? Thank you. Sherlock Holmes, where he has his one arch nemesis that has all this information, and he realizes this as mental castle. You know what I'm talking about? No idea. Sherlock winds up shooting him in the end.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, I just ruined it for you. Sorry. He shoots him in the end.
Okay.
I can't remember the exact story, but there is an association that works. So, and it's back to ancient Greek times where, and gosh, don't ever show this video to a 10 instructor who teaches history, they'll slaughter me. But there's basically this individual is at a festival and within a temple. He goes out of the temple, and then the temple collapses. And they ask him to help identify the bodies. Of course, all the bodies are mangled because when you have a stone temple falling on bodies, it tends to do nasty things. But he is able to, based on location, recall who was where. So he thinks about, okay, so-so was sitting by that area, so-so was sitting by that area, so it must be that body, must be that person. So associative areas, associative information. Each hemisphere, this might be new information, might not be, is concerned with collateral side of the body. So if something happens to your left side of your brain, it affects the right side of your body. If something happens to the right side of the brain, it affects the left side of your body. So have you ever had a grandparent or an aunt or an uncle or someone who's elderly that you know, or not even that old, who had a stroke, and now, like my brother had a stroke when he was 41, it's not that old. And now the right side of his body is affected, it happened on the left side of his brain. And lateralization, specialization of cortical function can occur in only one hemisphere. Oh yeah, and conscious behavior involves the entire kit and caboodle. So everything's involved in our conscious behavior. Motor areas, so we got the frontal lobe, motor areas that control voluntary areas, or voluntary movement. And the primary motor cortex is in the precentral gyrus. The precentral gyrus is right up here, so you have your central sulcus, and then your precentral gyrus is right there, marked in red, in front of the central sulcus. The premotor cortex is anterior to the precentral gyrus, so it's the next one over. And Broca's area is anterior and inferior to the premotor area. And then the frontal outfield is within and anterior to the premotor cortex, so it's right around there. You may have seen this map before, so not great, but you're seeing the face, hand, elbow, arm, head, knee, foot, and the foot, and again the face. And basically what it's denoting is the larger the image, the larger the area of the brain that's associated or responsible for basically sensory information or control of that area. So your face, you have a lot of control, right? And you know, this is why, and if you ever play poker, at least you gamble, that you know, you can make a lot of facial movements. Whereas you can actually detect where your sensory neurons are by taking a little pinprick and then pricking somebody along their skin. And they may not be able to feel when you prick certain areas, and you know that there's a gap. So you have more sensory information coming in on your face and your hands than you would say on your elbow. Because what do we do with our elbows? Just kind of rest them on the table. So it's in the precentral gyrus of the frontal lobe, so that's in front of that central gyrus. Pyramidal cells, so large neurons allow conscious movement, precise skill, skeletal movements. Also, your movements are a lot more precise when you have more real estate dedicated to it, so it makes sense also. And then the pyramidal cortical spinal tracts, these form from long axons that project down the spinal cord. So the axons are actually can be very, very long, like up to a meter long within your body, which is pretty long. And then somatotopy, all muscles of the body can be mapped to an area of the primary motor cortex. So if we were actually ethically and morally able to, but we won't because it's not very nice, to take a Dremel and just lift off your top, then we could stimulate different areas and cause either sensation or movement automatically. It's kind of cool. Lateralization is division of labor between the hemispheres. Hemispheres are not identical, so cerebral dominance means which hemisphere is dominant for language. So 90% of us have left-sided dominance, and that means usually you're right-handed. 10% have right-sided dominance, means you're left-handed. So if you've ever seen that magnet or sticker or cheesy slogan, only left-handed people are in the right brain or in the right mind, it's right? Because the right brain is right dominant. And of course, some level people are ambidextrous.
Yeah.
They're freaks, and you must hunt them down. No, you can. Yeah, some people are naturally ambidextrous, and some people just train themselves to be ambidextrous. So, I mean, you think about it. If you ever, I don't know a whole lot about it. I do know that if you ever watch kids writing, it takes a lot of effort. Yes, if I were to ask one of you to write with your non-dominant hand, it would take a lot of effort, but you could probably do it. But if you practice it, you're going to get better at it. Left hemisphere typically controls language, math, and logic. And right hemisphere, spatial skills, intuition, emotion, artistic and musical skills. And the hemispheres will communicate instantaneously. There's actually a bridge between your hemispheres called the corpus callosum. And what happens is everybody know what epilepsy is? All right, epilepsy, when you get uncontrolled seizures, they call it like a cerebral storm. For some reason, the neurons just start depolarizing and it spreads all through the brain and the person has a seizure. In extreme cases, they would do severing of the corpus callosum. They would sever the bridge, and then they could do some really neat experiments, because they would put up a divide like this, where this eye could see one thing, and this eye could see something else, and couldn't see what the other eye could see, and in those experiments, like the people were normal functioning, but in those experiments, it was like you had two independent brains. Protection of the brain, because you do need to protect your brain. I mean, obviously, one of the things that you have first off is you have the skin of the skull. Now, has anybody here ever cut their skull? Like, have gotten cut and did it need a little or a lot? A lot, like a lot. Happened to me last summer. I was at my sister's place. We went to the local park. I was playing tag with the kids, and I just got up just a step too soon before. Wait, what are you showing here, Centerfold? Just before like an overhang, banged my head. It didn't hurt, but gusher. And my mom is awesome. My mom's freaking out, but it's no big deal. So you have a lot of blood supply first off, because it's a very important area to protect. So if there is a lot of blood coming out, then you automatically go into protection. So the other thing, it helps with thermodynamics. It helps thermoregulation. Sorry, is the term I'm looking for. So you got the skin, you have periosteum, you have the bone, which is fairly thick, and then you have the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, but you have these meninges, and they cover and protect the central nervous system. They protect the blood vessels, they enclose venous sinuses. You have venous sinuses which collect the blood and then send it back to the heart. And it helps to contain the cerebral spinal fluid, and it basically forms partitions within the skull. So there are three layers to your meninges. Dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater, they all matter. Right, so you can see here the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, the pia mater, going from superficial to deep. And then meningitis is where you get inflammation of the meninges. So it may spread to the entire central nervous system, leads to inflammation of the brain. Well, what's the problem? If you've got the skull that's fused, and you have a brain that starts to swell, what happens?
Pressure.
It hurts with pressure.
Yeah, it kills, right? It kills. You might get seizures, pass out, delusions. It's all kinds of bad stuff. So meningitis, they have to do a sample of cerebral spinal fluid by a lumbar puncture. They do it in the lumbar region because the less, there's going to be damage by the punctures, the least chance of happening. But it is a bad thing. So if you hear about meningitis, this is it. Basically, bugs gotten in there, and now you have inflammation of the brain. The cerebral spinal fluid itself, so I'm not going to test you on the flow patterns, but you can see the flow patterns in this diagram from page 461. And cerebral spinal fluid is basically a constant cushion, because without your brain, you're not going to be doing too much. You might go into politics, but that's about it. No, nothing against politicians. They don't touch out. The first thing is actually it helps the brain to float, because if your brain didn't have cerebral spinal fluid, it's so delicate, its own weight would just crush itself, and then spasms, death, that kind of stuff. It also helps protect the central nervous system from blows and other trauma. It helps to nourish the brain and carry chemical signals. And one of the problems is, if you're, say, driving in a car and you stop quickly, right, what happens is your head keeps going. You get restrained by the seatbelt, your head keeps going, your head stops, your brain keeps going. Even if the airbag stops your head, your brain keeps going, and then you have a bruise on the front of the brain, right? This is why race car drivers now have a clip on the back of their helmet. Because think your head is fat and heavy. It's not fat, but it's heavy, right? You got a lot of bone material up there. And then you add on a helmet to that. Now you have a lot more weight. So that's why you'll see race car drivers, at the very least, will have a neck brace, or there might even be a clip in the back of the helmet onto their seat, so that if they're in an accident, their head doesn't go forward and snap the neck. The cerebral spinal fluid is basically how we get chemicals and nutrients to the brain. And it's a very large solution from the blood plasma, just slightly different than blood plasma, but it basically you have a blood-brain barrier. And this is a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. One of the things is it helps to maintain a stable environment. When you have an aneurysm within your brain or a rupture within one of the brain blood vessels, you actually can have problems because the blood has a different pH and can actually short out that area of the brain, to put it simply. So you have this barrier, provides a stable environment. And there are a few exceptions, but it's very tight junctions that help keep the brain separated from a lot of the stuff that's within the blood. And they have to go through different layers. First off, they have to go through the blood vessel walls. Then they have to go through this thick layer around the capillaries. And then they have to go through what they call the feet of these astrocytes, which are basically have these cells surrounding all of the blood vessels within the brain. So they have to go through the three areas. Now, it's not absolute. Certain stuff hopefully you can get through, oxygen, carbon dioxide, certain nutrients and toxins. But this is a major challenge in brain research, that we may have a drug that we know if we directly inject into the cerebral